All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the ConnectRVA 2045 Advisory Committee meeting. We are going to go ahead and get started with today's meeting. Of course, we're holding this meeting virtually with all of the call-in and participation information included within the agenda packet. And we also may have members of the public watching via YouTube. So we'll go ahead and get started and start with the roll call. Ms. Mueller, can you start with that?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everybody. I'll start with Town of Ashland. Ms. Amos.
Here.
Mr. Tucker. Chesterfield County, Ms. Smith. Ms. Benedict.
Here.
Goochland County, Mr. Coleman.
Here.
Mr. Kilduff. Hanover County, Mr. Vidunas.
Here.
Mr. Flagg.
Here.
Henrico County, Ms. Meidler. Ms. Deemer. I'm sorry, was that Sharon?
Yes, Sharon is here.
Thanks, Sharon. Ms. Deemer. New Kent County, Ms. Leduc.
Here, good morning.
Good morning. Powhatan County, Mr. Pompey.
Here.
Mr. Howland. City of Richmond, Ms. Clark.
Here.
Mr. Bridewell.
Here.
Ms. Erickson. Capital Region Airport Commission, Mr. Rutledge.
Here.
GRTC, Ms. Torres.
Here.
Ms. Del Ross. RMTA, Ms. Simmons. Plan RVA, Mr. Parsons.
Here.
Mr. Ariel.
Here.
Right Finders, Ms. Tisdale. Mr. O'Keefe. DRPT, Ms. Dubinsky. Mr. Sparks. VDOT, Ms. McAdory. Mr. Herman.
Here.
VCU, Mr. Leonard.
Present.
NAACP, Mr. Johnson. Richmond Area Bicycling Association, Mr. Burnley.
Here.
Virginia Asian Chamber of Commerce, Ms. Tran. Senior Connections, Mr. Williams.
Here, good morning.
Good morning. RVA Rapid Transit, Mr. Campbell. Bike Walk RVA, Ms. Lockett Gordon.
Here.
Port of Virginia, Ms. Nelson.
Here.
Southern Environmental Law Center, Mr. Pollard.
Here.
Virginians for High Speed Rail, Mr. Plogger. Federal Highway Administration, Mr. Duran.
Here.
And Tri-Cities MPO, Mr. Swikowski.
Here.
Thank you. That concludes the roll call for attendance. And Mr. Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you. The next item of business will be consideration of amendments to the agenda. Are there any changes that members of the committee or staff has to the agenda?
Mr. Chair, this is Chet Parsons. No change to the agenda, but I did want to note that the public review period for the Universal projects ended at close of business on the 23rd. So staff was able to compile the responses that we got in the public comment and sent that out late yesterday. So hopefully everybody had a chance to see that, but that should be in your inbox, and it's also posted on the website. So that'll be part of the discussion today.
All right, thank you. So seeing no changes to the agenda, we'll move on to item number 2, which is approval of the February 25th meeting summary. That particular summary was included within the agenda packet. Does anyone have any changes they would like made to the meeting summary? not hearing anything, can we go ahead and approve the meeting minutes? Does anyone have any objections? All right, hearing no objections, we'll have the meeting summary approved and we'll move on to agenda item number 3, which is the public comment period. Are there any members of the public that are joining us remotely that would like to participate? Since there are no public comment periods or members of the public that would like to share any thoughts with the committee, we'll move on to agenda item number 4, which is the LRTP process update task 3 planning.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Sulap's going to drive the slides, and I'm going to review the first few. So there's a couple items on the agenda today for planning, and then we'll talk about programming after this. We are in the process now where, as you all know, that we have been considering what the slate of projects to even be considered for the long-range plan should be, and that includes what is defined, what we have defined as a regionally significant project. Those measures have been approved by the advisory committee, and that is what has gone into helping to set up the list of projects that we are considering for testing, and we are calling that the universe of projects. That's where that term comes from. All of the projects that could be considered and would be reasonable to be included as a regionally significant project in the long range plan. So you'll have next slide. So at this point, as I mentioned, the public review period for the universe of projects, the box in the center, was 15 days from March 8th to the 23rd. And we closed that at 5 p.m. on the 23rd and compiled the comments yesterday and sent those out to you. The last time, and Sula, please correct me if I'm wrong, the last time we did the long range plan, there was very limited opportunity for public review of some of these components, including the universe of projects. So what we wanted to do this time was provide an opportunity through multiple means to allow advisory committee members, community stakeholders, general public to review and comment on all of the potential projects that we're going to look at for possible inclusion in our fiscally constrained plan, in our cost feasible plan. So we set up a wiki map on the ConnectRVA 2045 website, which had a couple options. One, you could actually place a marker and leave comments on the map itself according to a project location or whatever reason that someone might have to leave a comment on the map adjacent to the possible projects that we're considering. There was a comment form on the website, which we received comments on. And then we also encourage folks to submit email comments, and we got those as well. We'll go into that in a little bit more detail on the next slide. But before we do that, we do have plans for continuing opportunities for people to be engaged in the process. As I said, right now, we're considering all of the projects to be tested. If the advisory committee today approves this universe of projects, we will then begin the testing process, which is going through the performance measures, the GIS analysis, the travel model runs for each individual project, and that will come up with a project score. The project score will be considered along with the estimated project cost, and those rankings, and then a draft prioritization will be able to be reviewed for another 30 days in late spring, early summer. And that's the fourth square there. So we'll ask for comments on the rankings and the draft priorities. And then the final opportunity for public review will be late summer for the entire draft plan. once we do have the selected slate of constrained plan projects, we'll be presenting those along with the language of the plan, the organization of the plan, and a draft form for full public consumption. And then we'll move towards our October approval date so that we can match the requirements from federal highways in terms of our time frame for getting the plan adopted. Next slide. So in terms of the public comments for the universe of projects, on the Wikimap itself, we received 133 separate comments. We got 9 direct emails. We had 6 comments submitted through the long range plan website, the ConnectRVA 2045 website, for a total of 148 comments. And as staff preliminarily reviewed those comments yesterday, you can group them generally into 5 different categories: either support or opposition of the project, further questions regarding a particular project, further suggestions to a project. You know, you need to think about these things if you're going to look at this type of project. And then general suggestions that were more general in nature for the planning process or the plan development, not specific to any particular project. And as we, after today, staff will continue to develop responses to each of the comments, and we'll be able to share that back with the advisory committee and with the commenters themselves, if that's possible, if we have ways to contact them. And we'll obviously be putting all of this on the website as we developed responses and more detail on the comments we've received. Next slide. So that's the public review part. Before Sulab jumps into the details of the comments and any changes to be considered today, are there any questions from the committee on the public review process and the comments that have been received? And I know I apologize for the late notice. We tried to turn it around as quickly as possible with the closing of the public review period.
Chet, do you have any sense of, excuse me, may I? Do you have any sense of how many individuals or organizations submitted comments? You mentioned 148 comments, but those were some people provided, I presume, multiple comments. So how many individuals or organizations submitted comments?
I'm not sure if we know that right now, Joe. As we get into developing responses, I think we can better provide that. I would guess. I mean, there were multiple responses from single individuals, but I would guess probably 2/3 of the comments were unique.
Hey, Mr. Chairman, Champ here. Hello.
Yes, Champ.
Chet, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, Champ here. Chet, I just want to comment. When I reviewed the comments, it was ironic. It seemed like at least half of the comments were commenting that they didn't feel that there was enough time to comment on this, and word hadn't gotten out. Which, you know, considering this is a 25-year project and we only had 2 weeks to open those up, I guess that bothers me a little bit that people are giving feedback. So I just want to make sure that everyone was aware of that.
Yes, that was a general concern. We, as staff, we followed every measure we could. We shared information on social media. We sent emails to all of our stakeholders. I think we have about 250 interested parties that have signed up for information through the planning process and the website. They all got direct emails that the opportunity was open. Part of this process, and I'm not scolding anyone, but part of this process is that each individual advisory committee member, TAC member, elected official should be sharing this information to your respective constituents. So I would be more than happy to take any suggestions for our next 2 review periods. If there are other ways that we can publicize this, we're we're trying to cover all the bases and would be happy to try something new if there's other opportunities.
So
Hey,
Chet,
Chet.
this is Ben. Good morning. Is there any reason we can't extend this period?
I don't see any reason we can't extend the period. I think the critical thing right now, Ben, is that we'd like to start testing projects. So if we do extend the period, my suggestion would be that we note the projects that receive comments as projects of concern, and maybe hold the order of testing to wait and test those projects at the end. But staff, as you'll see in a couple minutes, we are up against the wall in terms of testing. Each project is going to take a considerable amount of time, and with the number of projects we have, we'd like to get that process started. But I think there's ways to work around that and extend the review period for the universe.
Good.
I think it's important to note, though, that the universe of projects, this isn't, there's some misconceptions with the projects, the comments we received, that this is the plan. And that's just simply not the case. The universe of projects is essentially all of the projects that we are going to test through the modeling and the GIS. And it doesn't mean that anything is approved or will even rank high. So I'd like to take that opportunity now to clear that up for anybody that's watching this.
Good, thank you.
Hey, Chad, I got one quick question. When you did the wiki maps, you just had on the map people commenting on the universe of projects, or were people able to also add other ideas?
I don't believe we had the tools to draw anything in, but the comment was there, and there was a comment form also at the bottom of the tool, so that people could submit some general comments, and people did do that.
So did people suggest some specific projects that weren't in the map?
I don't believe we got additional projects suggested. It was mostly comments about concerns about projects that were on there.
Okay, thanks.
Dirona has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, so the question that, or more of a statement that I have, I hear a couple of things and I'm unsure. So I hear that, okay, here's the universe of projects and you need to test, and then comments will be aligned to, that the public made will be aligned or tagged on specific projects. But I don't know if that really accomplishes what I think some of the issue is really that universe of project list. And if that is really what the region sees as even the list that needs to be tested. And so I think, and then with the 23rd being the deadline, and then the comments, and I don't know how we're responding to the comments prior to then voting and moving forward. I don't see how it's being incorporated into the process. And so, I mean, I think that, and I hear you, Chad, when you say that there are other there's other ways, there's other times for comments to occur. But I think that one of the key things is then that the list itself, I think, has to be responsive to the comments that have been made. But I think, I don't know, I think that I would potentially support additional time, just so that really we can see where the comments, you know, how the list changed based on the comments that people have. And really, I think, and really give with the onus on the advisory committee to really like forcefully ensure that everybody that needs to have input and be involved have actually done it. And I know we've been pre-warned and told, but again, I think, you know, I don't know if it does need to have a relook, and not a relook, but really more time and really structured so that we at least have agreements on the list.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
just two comments in response to Ms. Clark's concerns. One, this committee has been considering the universal project since August. So if there hasn't been time until now to make sure that the projects are vetted by each locality and other group, then I'm not sure we can allow. I'm not sure there's more time that would make a difference. But I would be. I mean, we'll work with the committee to extend time if that's the desire. I think the second point is we do have a deadline of October, and if we want to move forward with making sure that the process works the way it does, we need to keep considering the end game, and that's ensuring additional public review as more data is available on project priorities and rankings, and those kinds of things. We will obviously work with each jurisdiction to get verification on whether a particular project should be taken off the list. We've already started to do that yesterday based on projects that receive comments to contact individual jurisdictions to verify that, yes, they would like those projects to remain in the queue to be tested. So that will happen regardless. But that's just for the committee's information in terms of where we stand as staff.
Mr. Chairman, and Chad, I guess in the process, will there be opportunities to provide additional comments on the projects once the scoring has been known? It would seem to me that when we take this universe of projects and winnow it down into a fiscally constrained plan, that we'll have opportunities to add and subtract projects and comment on the individual projects. So it would seem to me this past comment period is not the last word, but simply another word of an opportunity to comment.
Yes, sir. You're exactly correct. The next 30-day public review period would be following the priorities or the ranking and the scoring of the projects. So that's the next opportunity to look at how everything shakes out and provide comments on what should be included and what shouldn't be.
And with that, would additional projects or be added to the list, or just the ones that are ranked would be what could be added and removed? I mean, considered.
No, the universe of projects is the foundation. So once the committee moves forward with starting the testing, that's the universe of projects that we will consider. We don't intend to add additional projects later. That's what we've been doing the last 6 months, is trying to figure out the list.
So Chet, it sounds like any projects that are in the universe can be removed once we rank and test, but adding them at this point, once we do the testing, is not really possible.
Yes, sir. You are correct.
And I guess the people that commented, did they provide contact information where we could tell them, hey, thank you for providing comments on the universe of projects. We will have additional opportunities. You can comment more once you have the ranking and that kind of thing. Is there some way that we can keep those people involved and engaged as we continue to spread the word about later public comment periods?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's I think it's a yes and no answer. Certainly we do have contact information for some of the people that provided comments. In order to encourage public comment, we didn't require them to submit an email address or even a full name, because we wanted people to feel free enough to put comments on the map without having to register. But those folks that we do have contact information from will certainly be able to reach back out and provide more information. And again, we'll use the methods that we've tried to use before, which is social media posts, direct emails to folks that have registered to be provided updates, and we'll share the responses and the clarifications on the comments that we received.
Mr. Chair, I have one more question, and this is for Chet. Did and I don't know if we did, but did we have like a sit down with the localities for the sets of projects for the universal projects?
Yes.
So each of the localities individually, did I miss that meeting?
So Durana, I guess Travis, I had a lot of communication with Travis for Richmond. He was the one who provided me all the information.
This is Travis. We didn't meet specifically, but I did give comments back.
Okay, yeah. So I thought that, I think that would have been beneficial as well. But yeah.
I think Tripp has raised his hand as well.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, Chet. I just wanted to say a few things. I do agree that I think some people who commented did not understand the process. I do think that some greater public outreach steps would be helpful, both with people feeling they had ample opportunity to weigh in at this stage and to better understand the process, where it stands and where it's going. And Chet, I'd be glad to send you some suggestions offline rather than get into that too much here as to maybe some additional steps. I did want to also, and I like the idea, Chet, of maybe giving a little more time to people at this step even, but being able to move ahead with some things that maybe no one has raised any comments about, because I do get the timeline we're under. One thing I did want to clarify, though, when you said that there would be no projects added, I get adding no new projects, but one element that I've been concerned about and I'm still not totally clear on is the consideration of alternatives to projects that are listed. So some of these projects, there may be a need, this project may be identified in a certain fashion, but when you look at it, you may find out it's not the most cost-effective or effective way of getting at it. Is there time and opportunity built into this process to look at alternative ways to address a particular problem identified? This has been an issue in every round so far of Smart Scale as well, so it's nothing unique here, but I haven't been clear on where you all have landed for this process.
So Tripp, I think what we are doing is taking the best alternative approach based on the studies or the champions, whatever they provide is the best alternative. Simply because this number of projects we have and the testing process and the staff capacity, it's going to be difficult to test all the alternatives. So what it means if the project is in the LRTP doesn't mean that we have to use the alternative which is suggested in the LRTP. So it's just a placeholder that project is in the constraint list. When the project is actually built, I think there's obviously consideration for different alternatives at that time.
Right, and this is always a trade-off with
right.
the time and resources. You know, obviously my concern would be I wouldn't want to see a project listed that, if built as listed, might not be one that I would support, but an alternative I might. I wouldn't want to have it in the list and take my chances that it would be fixed later on in some further study. So I get that this is always a balance to be struck in every planning exercise, but I just wanted to be clear for my own sake about alternatives, because there are a number of projects on this list that I'm very concerned about.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's totally understandable, Tripp. I think that part of the nature of regional long-range planning is that we can only get so specific in thinking about projects 20 years from now. So the conservative estimates for costs, the detail on the projects, those can't reasonably be ironed out at this stage. And as Seelab mentioned, when each, what we've called champions, when each jurisdiction or agency gets into the actual PE right-of-way engineering design, that's when there should be additional alternatives considered at that time to meet the same goals. And that's part of the reason why we started off this whole planning process with identifying issues rather than just starting to look at projects. So hopefully that can be considered as things progress. And obviously with CBTA and the ability to accelerate funding for construction now, that may be a lot more tangible for folks that don't have to think out 20 years, which is obviously very difficult for a lot of people to do.
Right. Thanks.
Mr. Chair, this is Catherine from Chesterfield. I just had one quick comment. Though I do agree with some of the comments that have been said about public participation and looking into expanding that time frame a little bit, I do just want to quickly commend Sulab and his team for all of the work that was done working with us and probably the other jurisdictions, because I know that this was not an easy project to undertake, and I just want that highlighted because I know that he worked very closely with us, and the inventory that was required to go through all of these projects, I can't imagine all of the work that's taken. So I just want that noted as well, because I think that's an important piece to this to highlight.
Thank you. And I agree. I think Sulab spent a lot of time with us here in Powhatan as well to refine that list and get as inclusive of a list as possible of regional projects. And I think, so Chet, I think you all wanted us to approve the draft list of projects today. Is that accurate?
That's the request so that we can start the testing process. I think Sulab has some details on a couple updates to the list before there's any action requested. Unless there's obviously if there's other questions about the public review process, we can do that now, or you can move forward with the remaining universal projects questions.
Yeah, I guess I think that we're going to go through the rest of the presentation and we'll have to circle back on this issue as to whether or not we want additional comment period, additional time for localities and that kind of thing. That's the main issues I'm hearing, is whether or not we extend the comment period and whether or not any localities need additional time. Is that what you're hearing as well? Yeah.
Why don't we just go on and do that? Agree to an extension as Chet suggested, Andrew, and for a month or so, not withholding the work that needs to be done as he suggested. But just, I mean, we've already discussed this at length.
Ben, if you want to make a motion, I'd second it.
All right, let's see. Champ, I'll second yours if you'll make the motion.
Okay, I'll make a motion that we extend the public comment period for 1 month to, and guys, let's take a look at the calendar. Today is the 25th. And I'll Chet, and Sulab, let me ask you all, how about 4 weeks to the 1, 2, 3 to the 22nd of April? Would that be, Ben, is that good for you?
That's fine, and not precluding the ability of the staff to continue working. I think that's important.
Champ, I would suggest, if it's okay at
Please.
this point, that maybe we do 2 weeks. We have scheduled time for about 1.5 months of testing all the projects, and if we're waiting a month on a portion of those projects, we may be pushing our limits in terms of staying on schedule.
How about meeting in the middle on 3 weeks?
Sure.
That's it. I'll second 3 weeks.
Okay, thanks.
So, and I guess, Chet, what does that mean for the committee? I guess we need to vote on if we extend the comment period, we have to vote on the draft universal projects at the next meeting, or how would that work in terms of our involvement, our review of the comments and endorsing that list?
I would encourage approval of the list today to start the testing with what's the right way to do this? With any significant comments that impact the list to be incorporated by staff as comments are received. Something like that. Again, I don't see that, I don't see that the foundation of projects is going to change all that much. I do think that based on the comments we've received so far, that there will certainly be concerns about particular projects, but I still see the validity in scoring those projects, even with the public comments, and that will help to influence the discussion of the advisory committee when you're looking at priorities. If a project scores well, but it gets 15 negative comments from the public, that may change where you put it in the overall ranking. So I think this all impacts the next round of public review as well.
Question, do we expect by adding this 3 weeks of additional public comment periods that new projects will originate and the universe of projects will grow? Or do we simply expect that we'll receive more comments about the quality and efficacy of the existing projects?
This is Chet. My opinion, based on doing this for a while, is that we will get comments on the slate that's presented. And we may get comments on additional projects, but my guess is if the localities and the other stakeholders on the committee haven't already thought of this project, it's probably not going to be, it's not going to show up in the comments. I think the additional step is if we do get project suggestions in the comments, there's still the clarification of if that project is regionally significant. So it's got to pass the smell test that we've applied to all the other projects that have already been listed. So I don't think we had many, if any, suggestions on new projects in the 140 so comments received so far. So my guess, Mr. Leonard, is that we wouldn't get additional ones.
This is Catherine. I really don't want to beat a dead horse here, for lack of a better term, but if we extend the public comment period for 3 weeks, we get additional comments from the public, yes, but we already have additional public comment periods slated into the process, and I don't see how extending the time period really affects this point of the process. Based on what you're saying, Chet, I mean, really the only case could be that some of the time bands for the projects get wiggled around a little bit, but all of it's really up to the discretion of the localities, if I'm understanding everything correctly. So is it worth pushing the process back a month to get additional public comment at this point in the process when we have public comments already built in later on down the road, if we aren't going to, build in any additional projects?
And I kind of agree with Catherine. I think I would rather really have a more robust, longer public comment period on the constrained list and that kind of thing, personally. And I think that would allow us an opportunity to really react and that kind of thing. It seems like we're getting public comments, but not going to have an opportunity to really address them without delaying the process, if that's what you're saying, Catherine. And I think that's maybe what Chet's saying.
Yeah, you said it a little bit more eloquently than I did. Thank you.
So this is Chet. I think based on what I'm hearing, if the committee decides to move ahead, as Catherine and Andrew are suggesting, I think the comment or the chat box, some of the comments received there about doing a better job of educating the public and stakeholders about what's going on and where we are in the process. That can happen, hopefully, if we do our jobs correctly between now and the review of a ranked, scored list, to build up to that next public review period, that next 30-day period for reviewing the scored projects. But again, I mean, staff is gonna, I mean, we'll take our lead from the committee and do what we need to do. I am a little concerned about extending the review period, but I totally understand the desires to do that and the responsiveness that we need to provide.
And Chet, let me just comment too, since I made the motion. And to me, this is where we really want the public input, so we get the public prioritization. If we wait and do it the other way, we certainly want robust comments then. But it's almost like we're putting the cart before the horse. We've already prioritized them, as opposed to getting the feedback on really what's important to citizens out there. So that, to me, that's why I think this is the time that we need it. And to your comment, I know I certainly will work with my contacts to get the word out and turn up the heat to make, or not heat, turn up the volume to make sure we get better comment. To my earlier point, and I'll conclude, is that again, when I looked at the comments and it seemed that there were half of the emails sent in were about not enough comment time, that really concerns me. And I think we want this to be open and fair and really solicit as much input as we can. And I think that's the smart move for all of us in the long run. Thanks.
So I guess we have a motion and a second on the floor, which would be to extend the comment period for 3 weeks. And if there are substantial comments, staff would address them after the comment period ends. Is that an accurate summary of the motion? I guess, Ms. Mueller, could you go ahead and we'll do a roll call and vote on the public comment period extension?
Ashland, Ms. Amos. Chesterfield County, Ms. Benedict.
Nay.
Goochland County, Mr. Coleman.
Yes.
Hanover County, Mr. Vidunas.
Opposed.
Henrico County, Ms. Meidler.
Aye.
Pompey.
We can't, I couldn't quite hear you. Did you call me?
Yes.
Nay.
City of Richmond, Ms. Clark.
Yes.
Capital Region Airport Commission, Mr. Rutledge.
Yes.
GRTC, Ms. Torres.
Yes.
Plan RVA, Mr. Parsons.
Abstain.
Ride Finders, Mr. O'Keefe.
Yes.
DRPT, Ms. Dubinsky.
Yes.
VDOT, Mr. Herman.
Yes.
VCU, Mr. Leonard.
Yes.
RAWA, Mr. Burnley.
Yes.
Senior Connections, Mr. Williams.
Yes.
RVA Rapid Transit, Mr. Campbell.
Yes.
Bike Walk RVA, Ms. Lockett Gordon.
Aye.
Port of Virginia, Ms. Nelson.
No.
Southern Environmental Law Center, Mr. Pollard.
Yes.
Virginians for High Speed Rail. I'm sorry, we're going to skip that one. Federal Highway Administration, Mr. Duran.
Abstain.
And Tri-Cities MPO, Mr. Swikowski.
Yes.
Want to circle back to Town of Ashland, Ms. Amos.
Thank you. Yes.
And New Kent County, Ms. Leduc.
Yes.
Thank you. That concludes the roll call, Mr. Chair.
I think there were more yeses than nos. Is that
Let
accurate?
me Let me tally that real quick for you, Mr. Chair. I have 17 ayes, 4 noes, and 2 abstains.
All right, so the motion to extend the comment period for 3 weeks has passed, and I guess we'll hand it over to you, Sulab, to keep going through the Universal Projects presentation.
Mr. Chair, just before Sulab starts, to just clarify, are we looking at the, what's the day? We're looking at the
21st, I think, wasn't that right? No.
the 15th or the 16th would be 3 weeks from
15th.
What day of the week? What day of the week?
Hey, Chet, does that work better for you if we would close on a Thursday, so you got that on a Friday to process and work on?
Either's fine.
No, the 3 weeks. Why don't we do the 15th then, based on the motion?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so since the final draft was sent to the LRTP Advisory Committee, there have been few minor changes, 6 changes in total. All the changes have been in the highway projects. 3 projects were deleted because they were simply duplicates. The error was that we used route name in some of the projects and route numbers, so that got confused. But later, while we checking all the projects, we found out the errors and deleted those 3 projects. There was a typo. The I-64 and US 33 Staples Mill interchange, it was wrongly stated as I-95 and Staples Mill, so that was changed, a simple typo. And 2 projects, they were overlapping each other, so the project limits were corrected. So now, because of the 3 deletions, we have 182 highway projects instead of 185 as it was in the final draft, as it was sent to LRTP Advisory Committee. So once the LRTP Advisory Committee approves this project after the 3 weeks of public extension of the public engagement period, the final universal projects would be distributed with new IDs because it's confusing. As we started the process, we gave certain IDs and then we had to delete few projects. Some projects, the description changes, things like that changed. So overall, to make it fine-tuned without any holes we don't get confused, I think once everything is finalized, we'll give new IDs to all the projects, and that would be distributed to the LRTP Advisory Committee. So as it stands now, today, we have 268 projects, 182 highway projects, 15 bridge, 11 transit projects, 37 active transportation projects, 14 park and ride projects, and 9 rail projects. We see that some of the numbers have decreased. It's basically because we found out that some of the projects have secured funding. So anything which has already secured funding doesn't need to be in the universal project. That's why they were deleted. There were, I think, 4 or 5 sections of Fall Trail which had secured funding. So that's why we deleted them from the active transportation. One rail project was in Tri-Cities MPO. So we can only look at the project which is in the RRTPO Metropolitan Planning Area boundary. So one was in Tri-Cities MPO, which obviously when Tri-Cities MPOs start their long-range transportation plan would definitely address that. So as we can see, the total needs is $7.82 billion as it stands now. 68% highways, almost 9% transit, 3% active transportation, 17.54% rail. And I think that's all I have for this. I won't be asking for this action. So any questions on the universal projects?
So I guess based on our last motion too, we would be giving you as staff, the authority to make any adjustments based on significant comments received during the public comment period. Is that correct?
So we have to define what would be a significant comment. So if there is one comment which simply says dislikes the project, are we going to remove it? Or if I know there's one project we got a lot of comments on, but that was it. Other than that one project, we probably got maybe one comment of like or dislike to that particular project. So,
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
my suggestion is that we have established project champions in each local jurisdiction. My suggestion is staff would review the comments that have been received and work with each champion to decide whether that project remains on the list or not, to be considered as under the universe.
Okay, so if we endorse the universe of projects, there may be a minor change at the discretion of staff and the sponsoring locality.
Yes.
Are there any additional questions about the universe of projects, or is anyone ready to make a motion?
I'll make a motion.
And who is that?
I'm sorry, this is Catherine from Chesterfield.
All right.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, would you please repeat what we're considering?
Yeah, I think the motion would be to approve the universe of projects, but allowing staff to make any changes based on public comments received with the consent of the sponsoring locality.
Thank you.
And that would include both addition of potential new projects as well as removal of existing projects or refinement of existing projects?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, that's my assumption. Yes, we'd work with the project sponsors and the champions to decide what to do in all respects.
All right, I'll make a second. This is Joe Vidunas.
So Catherine made the motion, Joe seconded. Let's go ahead and do the roll call.
Town of Ashland, Ms. Amos.
Aye.
Chesterfield County, Ms. Benedict.
Aye.
Guthrun County, Mr. Coleman.
Yes.
Hanover County, Mr. Vidunas.
Aye.
Henrico County, Ms. Smidler. New Kent County, Ms. Leduc.
Aye.
Powhatan County, Chair Pompey.
Nicole, you faded out. Can you repeat that?
I'm sorry. Powhatan County, Mr. Pompey.
Aye.
City of Richmond, Ms. Clark.
Aye.
Capital Region Airport Commission, Mr. Rutledge. GRTC, Ms. Torres.
Aye.
RRTPO, Mr. Parsons.
Aye.
Ride Finders, Mr. O'Keefe.
Aye.
DRPT, Ms. Dubinsky.
Aye.
VDOT, Mr. Herman.
Aye.
PCU, Mr. Leonard.
Aye.
RABA, Mr. Burnley.
I'm going to abstain on that.
Senior Connections, Mr. Williams.
Aye.
RVA Rapid Transit, Mr. Campbell.
Aye.
Bike Walk RVA, Ms. Lockett Gordon.
Aye.
Port of Virginia, Ms. Nelson. Southern Environmental Law Center, Mr. Pollard.
Abstain?
Virginia Center for Inclusive Federal Highway Administration, Mr. Duran.
Aye.
And Tri-Cities MPO, Mr. Swikowski.
Aye.
I'm going to circle back to Henrico County, Ms. Smidler.
Aye.
Capital Region Airport Commission, Mr. Rutledge.
Aye.
VDOT, Mr. Herman.
Aye.
Thank you. That concludes the roll call, Mr. Chair.
All right, then I guess that motion passed. So we have our universal projects and we'll continue the public comment period per the previous motion. So I guess I'll turn it over to one of the staff members on task 4 programming.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I can start with it and then Miles will continue about this. So as we know, once, as we know, the programming stage, once we have the universal project, we score the project, rank and evaluate the project based on the project prioritization process, which was approved by this committee in January. And simultaneously, we also work on developing a constraint plan based on the revenue projections, which was provided to us by VDOT and DRPT. So for project scoring and evaluation, we still need a couple of cost estimates. I think as per now, today, I think we only don't have cost estimates for 2 projects, I-95 projects, and we'll be working with VDOT to get that. Some of the active transportation project, we need accurate location alignment. We're still working on getting that with the localities as well as with working with other champions. For some of the complex projects which have been defined, like the interchange modification or intersection improvement, we need conceptual sketches for those to accurately represent them in our modeling network. So we already have a few of those conceptual sketches with us, but we still need some of those so that we can work on the running the model to get results for those. Staff is also working for model run preparation. It's a significant task. VDOT was generous that this modeling requires a software license, which is Cube, and we only had 1 license. So we want to use multiple stations to run the model. So VDOT was generous enough to provide us unlimited licenses of Cube. So we can install the Cube software in multiple stations and run the model simultaneously. It normally takes 3 hours to run the model for 1 project. So we have 268 projects. So you can imagine the time required. So we'll be doing the model runs in at least 6 stations. 2 staff here in the LRTP would be doing 2 stations each. That's 4. We have a little bit support from VDOT TMPD. So probably some projects would be done by the TMPD as well. And then some of the complex projects, we are going to ask our consultants to doing that. So we'll basically have 6 stations to run the models to get all this data finalized and get all the results prepared. Database developments, the model runs not only takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of space as well. So 1 model run is normally 10 gigs of data. So normally it's hard to manage that without a proper database development system, which we are trying to develop. And all the model runs need to be in 1 machine to get the final tally. So yeah, we were working on that. We staff got some external drive to store the backup and things like that. And still working on how to present all the data, trying to automate it because 268 projects, different model runs, and then we have to find out what exactly we want from the model run to that specific Excel folder. So it's going to take a lot of database development, which we are going to do. And then finally, project scoring, 268 projects as it stands now, and then 15 performance measures for each project, which is more than 4,000 individual numbers, individual results. So that's a lot of work to be done. And the total time we had before the extension of the public engagement period was 1.5 months. I think that was extremely difficult to finish, but we're still targeting to do that. So that's all I have for the project scoring and evaluation. The next step obviously is the constraint plan development, and Miles will have a presentation on that. And I can stop sharing my screen.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. If I haven't met you before, I'm Miles Bushing. I handle the programming and the allocation side at the TPO. So we just want to go through some of the revenue projections for the plan. So we keep hearing about the constrained plan development. Basically, what that means is that the planned programs and costs in our plan have to be less than our expected revenues, which essentially requires us to project out revenues to 2045. So in terms of the revenue projections, DRPT provides us with the transit funding projections. So any federal or state funding that's going to be used specifically for transit is projected by DRPT. For the federal funding, the TPO has actually gone ahead and projected it all the way out to 2045. DRPT provided projections to 2025. For the highway side, VDOT provides us projections. So that's federal, state, and CVTA revenues. We call it highway funding, but that some of that funding is flexible, can be used for transit. It can also be used for other modes, bike ped, anything else that we'd want to look at as well. So there's a lot more flexibility on this side. So it says highway, but it's not specifically just for highway projects. And then finally, GRTC provides us input as well on how to handle operating revenues and the use of certain revenues. Some of this revenues that we have on the transit side can be used for capital or for operations. So we want to make sure that our planning lines up with what GRTC is intending to do. So this is a breakdown of the revenues that we have right now. So this is the federal transit funding. 5303 is planning. 5307 is for general capital and can also be used for some operating expenses for GRTC. The 5339 is for bus replacements. And then the 5310 is enhanced mobility. So this is a much smaller program, and that's annually awarded. So these are the expected revenues from the federal side. On the state side, the state provides matching. So for most federal programs, the federal government provides 80% of the funding, and 20% has to come from the state or locality. So there's state matching to the funding for all of those FTA programs. And the state also has a capital grant program. This is estimated out to 2045 based on the current share that GRTC receives from that pot. And then finally, we have the local and agency transit funds. So this is the CVTA revenue, the 15% that goes to GRTC, and then the local matches that are required for all of the FTA funding. Then on the highway side, it's a little bit cleaner. All the federal and state funds are generally combined. So we have an administrative pot. We have two pots for maintenance. State of good repair, which is for generally interstate pavement and bridge replacement or rehabilitation. The discretionary district grant and high priority. The district grant and high priority are smart scale. And then the final 5 lines that you see on here, TA, RSTP, and CMAC, those are pots that are controlled. The allocations are handled through the TPO. So the TPO makes the decisions on what projects these get funded through these sources. On the regional and local side, we just have the CVTA revenue. So this is the 35% that goes to the regional and the 50% that goes back to the localities. So in total, it's broken down by time bands. Sorry. So this is the 6 years each time band. So the SIP, which would be the next 6 years from the adoption of the plan, that funding is already generally committed. And then we have it into 3 time periods after that, a near term, midterm, and long term. But in total, we have about 19.3 billion. This doesn't include GRTC's operating revenues and funds, and it also doesn't include any funding for rail projects. Rail is largely handled at the state level, so it's hard to break it down for an MPO specific estimate. So as I just mentioned, the 6-year plan largely commits the funding for 22 to 27. So that's already going to be handled. There's not a lot that we need to do other than see which projects aren't fully funded there. The rest of the funding for 2028 through 2045 is largely determined by the revenue source and then policy that's set by this committee. So in terms of the expenses, we have 3 sort of main categories of pots that this is all going to go into. As you recall, we were talking about the project inclusion guidelines earlier and what is a regional project. Beyond regional, we also have programmatic expenses and local projects. So programmatic expenses are generally the operation side of things. So highway maintenance, administration, GRTC operations, maintenance, MPO planning. And you can see certain funding sources naturally fall in that category. We're expecting this will be over half of the revenue. So of that 19.3 billion, over half of it will fall into this category. So it's not something that we have to plan for with the long range plan. In terms of the projects, I guess I should say. The local projects, these are projects that will also not be included in our universe of projects. These are smaller projects or on routes that are less significant, so local roads, minor rural collectors. So some example projects would be like intersection safety improvements, signal retiming, sidewalks, or a local road extension. On the transit side, it'd be things like a bus replacement or stop improvements. So there's some funding sources that make sense to go onto this side. So the CVTA local funds, which makes sense for local projects. GRTC funds can be used here. So that covers a lot of these categories, the 5307, the 5339. The district grant program. So this is smart scale. Essentially, those are the projects that it's a pot that the MPO can't compete for that funding. So that would naturally go towards more of the local projects. And then CMAQ's another potential source here. So that is one of the MPO controlled sources of funding, but it funds programs like our TDM and some bus replacement projects. So it's definitely something that supports more of the local projects as well. And then we get to the final category, which is the regional projects, which is what our universe of projects covers. So these are more of the major capacity projects, arterial widenings, BRT routes, transit centers, interchange reconfigurations, and as well as the multiple locality or multi-jurisdictional projects, so regional bus routes or the fall line. And for this, we have sources of funding as well. So the CVTA regional funds, the GRTC funds, the high priority projects, which is the other half of Smart Scale. And then obviously the RSTP, CMAQ, and TA, which are programs that the TPO allocates the funding for. So these are all funding sources that would be available for the regional projects. As we start developing the constrained plan, we'll be able to get actual numbers into the time bands and start seeing what the breakdown looks like. This is just a brief overview of what the revenue looks like moving forward. As we work on developing the constrained list, I believe the target is May to come back with a draft constrained plan for this. So that would include the revenue projections for each of these pots, as well as the projects that could be selected with that revenue. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you have about revenue or constrained plan development moving forward.
It wasn't clear from your conversation or from your presentation. You mentioned $19 billion available over the 20-year period, but you didn't zero in on how much is available for the regional projects, specifically for funding the universe of projects. I remember a number earlier in the presentation, we have about $7 billion worth of projects. What's our rough fiscal constraint? What's from your work? What's that number we've got to winnow all this stuff down to? I know it's early, but we're close.
We're expecting about $5.5 billion would be available for the regional project pot. So, and the other piece of that as well is that the projects, that $7 billion number that Sulab gave out doesn't include any escalation or inflation if we move it into later time bands. So there's a pretty big gap there. The other piece is the rail projects, which are over $1 billion of the $7 billion, will not be included in the constrained plan. They'll just be in the vision list because we don't have any regional funding for that. So it's about $1 billion to start with, short, but then there's also the inflation factor. So we'll see how that works out depending on where the projects fall.
It's my experience from other regions that usually the project list is double or triple the available money. So this really isn't that bad.
Miles, two quick things. One is I wanted to just be sure, because this is what I thought was the case, what you just said. And that is the rail projects identified in the universe of projects are actually not going to be part of the constrained long-range plan because the funding for that comes from elsewhere. Is that correct?
Yes, so we do not have any regional level estimates of revenue for rail projects. And that's because rail is largely being handled at the state level instead. So they're going to be in the vision list instead. And we've worked with DRPT and that's been their suggestion, is to just include it in the vision list. So that
makes sense to me too. I just wanted to clarify that for people because on the earlier chart of requests, the rail number, was something like 17%. I forgot now exactly what it was, Sulab, but that's actually not going to be part of the constrained long-range plan. So I think that's an important point. The other thing, well, it's just real briefly, would be helpful, and those slides were really helpful, had a lot of great numbers. When you had the 4 or 5 boxes of the amounts available when you were looking at each mode, would be to add one more column that gives a total. That just would be really helpful, I think, for people to follow what's out there. Thanks.
Hey there, this is Catherine from Chesterfield. The presentation was really great, and it just got me thinking that something like this that kind of puts all of the numbers and funding sources into perspective could be really helpful as we move into the kind of next 3 weeks of public participation. I don't know if there's a way to kind of make it a little bit more like into a 1 or 2 pager, but I think some of the concerns that were brought up in the earlier part of the meeting was that a lot of the folks that wrote in didn't quite have a good grasp on the process. And I think obviously the funding sources is a big part of the process. So I think if we could kind of make this presentation a part of the public participation and informing folks like what the time bands are, what this means for the universe of projects, and kind of put that into perspective for everybody. I think that could be a really helpful piece in informing the public participation.
I'll defer to you, Chet. It looks like you're about to see something.
I'm just trying to decide. I think that Catherine's point is good. I don't want to try and encourage people to drink from a fire hose, though. I think the finance part and the constrained plan list is definitely what we want to include in the next round of public engagement. When we have the scores and the rankings, I think this is that's a natural place to talk about, not being able to fund all the projects.
Yeah.
And I think that's a great point, and we'll certainly work to. I think a 1 pager or 2 pager is a great idea. So yeah, we'll definitely work on that. Thanks.
All right, are there any other questions of staff on this component of the today's meeting? So I think Sue Laba, you to walk us through the schedule.
You're muted.
I'm sorry, I was muted. So this is basically the schedule we had thought before this meeting that the LRTC Advisory Committee would approve the Universal project today. So based on that, the schedule is basically based on that, but I think we can adjust accordingly. So for programming, I guess the project prioritization methodology that was introduced to the LRTP Advisory Committee in December was approved by the LRTP Advisory Committee on January 28th. So next step obviously was project scoring. I think we can start project scoring immediately after this meeting. Still wait for the public, finish the public engagement period, but I think parallelly we can start working on the project scoring. So that's gonna take at least 2 months, April and May. Parallelly, we'll be working on the constraint plan development as well. So the constraint plan, it was introduced, the concept was introduced to LRTP Advisory Committee in the previous meeting. Miles gave us a good detail on today's meeting. And we are thinking of a potential public survey, not a public comment period, but a potential public survey on the constraint plan to simply ask the people what would be their preference in funding different types of projects. So staff is working on developing this public survey. It will be in MetroQuest platform, and it will once we have, I think we don't want to overlap the public comment period, the extended public comment period with this potential survey. I think once that public comment period ends, then we can probably open this potential public survey for the constraint plan development. So it's going to be late in April. Then we would, once the project is scored and we have some solid numbers for the constraint plan, that would be discussed. The staff recommendation, that which is the first step, would be discussed on the May 27th meeting. That's the target. I don't know if we will meet that target or not, but that's the target at this moment. And we'll have a public comment period, a 1-month public comment period after that discussion. Simultaneously, we'll work with the champions to get their vetting as well for the constraint list. So we'll work with the champions. We'll have a robust public comment period, a month-long period at that time. And then we'll come back to the LRTP Advisory Committee. Now, based on the schedule, I think the June 24th meeting is what we are targeting on for the constraint plan development approval. And then after that, it goes to the policy board. The policy board normally doesn't have an August meeting, and the July meeting normally falls around the July 4th weekend. So it might be somewhere between, if that happens, it might be somewhere between like late August, late July, early August. So we'll ask for their approval at that time. And once the constraint plan has been approved by the policy board, then we can evaluate the plan. So basically, staff will be working on the performance measures, the economic impact analysis, environmental justice, accessibility assessment, all those things in June, July timeframe, and then present that to the LRTP Advisory Committee on July, August timeframe. Simultaneously, we need to do air quality conformity interagency consultation. The interagency consultation doesn't exactly match with the localities of the Richmond region. It includes some localities from our region as well as some other localities from Tri-Cities MPO. So we'll have that interagency consultation. VDOT in the Environmental Division is the lead on that. And once the constraint plan has been adopted, I guess, then we can work on the interagency consultation. The air quality conformity also requires a formal public period, and we plan to align that with the plan's final public preview period once the constraint plan has been adopted by the policy board. And then we have the public participation evaluation, which would be done towards the end after all the public review period has been ended. So it's probably going to be discussed, presented to the LRTP advisory committee in the last meeting. Some other things to notice in the schedule is the document development. We are parallelly working on developing the LRTP document, as well as a few technical reports as well. Before the final public review period, which probably would start after August 15, we need to finish the final draft. And then once the public comment period ends, we need to make the final draft with any comments suggested by the public and documentation of all the public comments received during the whole phase of the plan. So that's tentatively decided at this moment to be around September 15th. That's the day which the LRTP advisory committee agenda would be sent to the group. So we are targeting that we send you the draft document at the same time. The final thing is adoption. So we'll be asking once when we ask the board for the constraint plan adoption, we will also ask them to request them to open a formal public review period for the whole plan, and that would be a July-August timeframe. It's going to be a month-long period in which we'll be actually, if the pandemic situation allows, we'll actually be holding in-person meetings, at least 3 or 4 locations in the region. So obviously that depends upon how the pandemic goes. And obviously at that time, we also plan to visit all the 9 localities to give the presentation on the LRTP to the Board of Supervisors, Town Council or City Council at that time. And also we'll be sending out the draft documents to interested agencies. I guess we have a list of the agencies, environmental agencies, government agencies, which we have to send those to them. And if they provide any comments, we have to incorporate that. Once that's done, the final approval with all the public comment and the final document would come to LRTP advisory committee for final approval around September 23rd. Looking at the track record that we tend to get comments towards the end period of the comment period, and staff would like to have some time to process it. The regular meeting for LRTP advisory committee on September 23rd may not suffice enough time. So if that's the case, we would need a special meeting early October in which we would ask the LRTP advisory committee, this group, for the final approval of the plan. Similarly, once the LRTP advisory committee approves it, goes to the board, and depending upon when they approve this plan, October 7th is the regular board meeting day, and if we can't finish everything within that time, we need to have a special meeting before October 31st for the board approval. And then once the board approves, we send that to the FHWA FTA. October 31st deadline, that still stands. And I think that's all I have.
All right, are there any questions of Sulab about the rest of the schedule? All right, since I don't hear anything, are there any final comments from committee members or staff before we adjourn?
One other comment, Mr. Chair. We are, they're not there now, but we're going to work to get both presentations from this morning on the website. The universal projects and the staff recommendation are there now, but we'll work get Sulab and Miles to post their presentations so people can share those if they need them.
Okay, great. Anyone have anything else they'd like to say before we adjourn? All right, it looks like our next meeting will be in about a month, April 22nd at 9 a.m. Thanks everyone for participating, and we'll see you in about a month.
Bye.
Bye.